Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, don't go giving us the hi-hat, because it's Miller time. This is Miller's Crossing. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Miller's Crossing, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, I was going to do a whole bit here where I confess that I have an addiction to the video game Polito, but actually I don't think I do. I'm just an enthusiastic gamer. Polito was kind of a gaming craze about a year ago, so I got started late when I picked it up this year, but I totally see why it got super popular. It's really well done. It's fun from the beginning when you don't know what you're doing because it's just like engaging and entertaining, and then as you learn, there's more and more levels to how sophisticated you can play the game and go further and further in it. But, you know, I could stop whenever I want, but right now I'm just starting to get decent. I've beat like 12 of the 15 decks for anyone who does play and know, and I've got up to like the black difficulty on one of them, so I'm inching up my skills and watching YouTubes on it to learn more strategies and stuff. And it's kind of fun, and it ruins my eyes because I play it on my phone and I hold it too close for hours at a time, but that's the trade-offs.
But you do have the option of playing it on your computer, right? It's not strictly a mobile game.
Yeah, it's on all kind of platforms and consoles and desktops. But you know what? I don't know if I switch to another platform, would I start over and have to unlock all the cards and decks from zero? I'm not sure.
I remember when you told me you were getting into Polito, and I was like, now? You know, like, it's been all quiet on the Polito front as far as I could tell for a while.
Yeah, it was a big craze, but strangely enough, I'm still seeing that there's YouTubers that are still dropping videos, playthroughs and strategy videos and stuff, and they're getting tens of thousands of views quite quickly. So like the craze subsided from where it really broke through, but there's a lot of people still playing and consuming the content.
Well, that's good. You found a hobby to distract yourself from the horrors at your door.
It's not bad to have something in your pocket at this time in the world.
When I start thinking about the state of the world, I got no problem going on my phone.
Exactly. That's me just slumped in my chair.
Yeah, I have not become addicted to any video games recently, but I did have a pretty fun weekend because we've talked about this. I don't know if the listeners are aware, but everybody in my family just has the same birthday week.
Yeah. Happy birthday, John family.
Me, my son, my wife, my daughter, my mom, we're all no more than 13 days apart from each other in birthdays.
Nice tight cluster.
Yeah, so we do one big party to keep it manageable because if everybody got their own party, it'd be a little crazy.
Yeah.
And that was this weekend. And then my daughter had her own party on Sunday with her classmates. But on Saturday, we had like a family party, grilled in the pouring rain, which is one of my least favorite activities. But you know,
okay,
somebody's got to do it, and had some brews and just good times. So
that sounds good.
I'm bringing that kind of relaxed energy into my recording this week of Miller's Crossing. But before we get into that, did you happen to watch anything that you wanted to tell the listeners about?
I did. I want to tell the listeners about Murderbot, which is a new sci-fi action/comedy series on Apple TV. It stars Alexander Skarsgård, who's one of the guys that we like. He's also a producer on it, so you get the feeling he's really into this show and into this character. He plays the titular Murderbot. It is fun. It's light fare. It shares that quality of tone with the source material, a series of books called The Murderbot Diaries by author Martha Wells, which I happen to have listened to all 7 of them. I actually had to double check, and I've listened to every one that she's put out. They're not the best sci-fi literature. They're not that deep, but they're enjoyable kind of popcorn reading. They're short. They're like 4-hour listens. They're like 150-page novellas, which makes them like easy to consume, and they're kind of bingeable, which is, you know, very contemporary form in this day and age. And content-wise, they're also very contemporary. It's about this lethal security robot who happens to hate eye contact and have social anxiety and like to just stay inside watching his favorite streaming TV shows that he's downloaded into his internal storage. But it touches on some interesting, serious themes too: human rights, corporate malfeasance, and more. And I'm liking the show. My only complaint is that Apple didn't take the hint and make the series itself bingeable. They're dropping 1 episode a week. And so I think as of when this pod airs, there's only 5 of the season's 10 episodes out, but I intend to keep going and watching them.
Nice. I just saw David Dastmalchian's in it as well, who I'm a fan of.
Yeah, he's fun. He's always great.
I have not had a chance to check it out yet, but I was even more intrigued after logging onto the AV Club one morning. And the headline was, "God bless Alexander Skarsgård for being willing to look this dumb." And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. Because like he typically plays very alpha male type characters, very competent, very serious.
Yes.
So I'm certainly interested to see what he's doing on Murderbot. I'm sure I'll get around to checking it out. I was going to bring the show show Duster, which is a new HBO Max show starring Josh Holloway of Lost fame. But then as luck would have it, we had to delay this recording and I had time to watch Mountainhead, which is from the creator and writer of Succession, Jesse Armstrong, one of the writers, who, he's made a lot of like biting political satire over the years, like In the Loop and Peep Show. He's also written some bad movies like Downhill, starring Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Okay.
So bit of a mixed bag in his track record. And I'm sorry to say that Mountainhead is one of the more mixed in a bad way of the bags.
Oh.
He rushed production of this movie, thinking that it was very important that it get out in this moment in time where tech billionaires seem to have an undue amount of influence over world affairs and specifically American affairs.
Sure.
The premise is 4 old billionaire friends, including a very obnoxious Elon Musk surrogate named Venice, played by Corey Michael Smith. And no shade to Corey Michael Smith. He does a great job. But like doing a great job playing the most annoying fucking person in the world doesn't mean I want to spend 2 hours with you, Yeah. And that's kind of my grand theory about this movie is that he put his thumb on the scale a little too much at making these guys feel like real pieces of shit with nary a relief to be found throughout the entire movie. So the premise is the Corey Michael Smith character, the richest man in the world. He owns a social media platform where misinformation runs rampant. Sounds familiar.
Totally.
But there's been a new update that he kind of pushes through without any oversight. And they keep it somewhat vague, but it can generate videos and images using AI that are impossible to debunk, essentially.
Okay.
So then people start uploading images of certain ethnic groups attacking landmarks in America. And that leads to citizens going to attack them in their neighborhoods, and it starts spreading worldwide, and countries fail, and planes are falling out of the sky and the power is going off for large parts of the world, and they're at this mountain retreat just having like their bro weekend while this all happens, and it's their fault. There's another character named Jeff, played by Rami Youssef, who is a rival of Venice but also a friend, and it's also kind of vague, but he has a software that he says could provide guardrails for this AI and kind of call out what's real and what's not, but he doesn't want to do business with the Venice character because he hates him. So then it gets very silly at times, but Steve Carell's in it. And man, who told Steve Carell he was a voice guy?
Is he doing voices?
That man is always doing voices. So if a Steve Carell movie is going to be funny, then Steve Carell just does his normal voice. If it's going to be dramatic, he's got to do a fucking thing.
Oh, okay.
First of all, he's usually got some kind of weird prosthetic involved. Like if you saw Foxcatcher, he has his big stupid nose. And then he's doing a voice throughout the whole thing. And then he's doing a voice in this and so on. Like if Steve Carell's doing a voice, I want nothing to do with that movie because he sucks at it. He's like aggressively bad in this.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And Jason Schwartzman's good in it. He's probably the character that I thought was the funniest. But like, again, they're all just terrible, horrible people. And it's basically the 4 of them the entire movie. There's very little to break that up. So I think Jesse Armstrong did what he meant to do, but like, to what end? It doesn't make it fun to watch or enjoyable.
It sounds interesting and compelling because it's so plausible and so topical. But yeah, if it's kind of like all negative, like the characters are hateable and the situation is too chilling to be comfortable with.
And like, I'm not somebody who needs to like the characters to enjoy it. I think Jesse Armstrong really benefited from Succession's, first of all, cast, and just the fact that you get 10 hours a season to kind of learn about these people. And even as we come to recognize that they're even worse than we thought they were at first, we can't help but feel a connection to them because we spend so much time with them. And here you don't get that benefit. You're just kind of tossed in the deep end and you have to swim. And like, it'd be fine if they were bad in an entertaining way, but like, again, Corey Michael Smith does a great job, but like Elon Musk is insufferable and not like in an entertaining way. Like I want to claw my eyes and ears out every time he's on my screen. But that's not what you look for from a movie character, even when you're supposed to hate. You want to be able to tolerate them on screen.
Yeah, you got to put something in there. And like you said, with the Succession characters, they're lovably flawed enough of the time that you can enjoy them on screen. But I mean, I still applaud him for trying to make relevant content that speaks to today's issues. So
absolutely. I'll give him a shot no matter what he makes. I will check it out and go in with an open mind because I think Succession and In the Loop are both, 2 of the best satires of people who wield power irresponsibly that have ever been made. So just unfortunately a swing and a miss. But like you said, commendable that he gave it a try.
Sure.
Which brings us to Miller's Crossing. I don't know how. I don't have a segue planned, but Miller's Crossing. Ian, this is our first Coen Brothers movie. It's exciting.
Totally.
First, but definitely not our last. They unfortunately have quite a few movies we could cover. Did you know anything about Miller's Crossing? Were you familiar with it? Had you seen it before? Or did you, like me, often mistake it for the movie Barton Fink, which came out 1 year later?
figure. I knew it existed, and similarly, I thought I had seen it. I confused it for a different movie. I was thinking I had seen it when I had actually seen Road to Perdition, which is also a movie where a stoic right-hand man to an old-time mob boss is at the center of it.
There's fedoras and Tommy guns aplenty in both.
Similar look and feel. So I hadn't seen Miller's Crossing. Maybe it's because I think I was intimidated by Gabriel Byrne. I took him too seriously, and I thought that this movie looked like it would be too much of a dark, serious slog, which is dumb because once you know the Coen brothers, you realize that even if it's a dark, serious movie, it's going to be lively and it's going to be funny in parts, which this movie absolutely is. So I'm glad I finally got the excuse to come around to it.
Yeah, same. I think I have seen it once in the past, but I did not have really any memory of it. So it was like watching it for the first time. And I found it very charming for one thing. It's super well acted, really well paced. It's dense plot, but not one that you need like an index to follow who did what and why. Like they do a good job of keeping you abreast of the changes. But I just found it exceedingly pleasant, even though it's violent at times and pretty fucked up. I don't know, just the way everyone talks. I love the dialogue. I love the script. I love the actors. I love the performances. Everybody is pitch perfect for their role. And it showed me sides of actors that I wasn't familiar with. Like Marcia Gay Harden, I was intellectually aware that at some point she was a young woman, but I've always known her as like a mature kind of no nonsense, like authority figure. You know, that's how I've just become familiar with her. And she was like in her early 20s making this movie, and I'd just never seen that side of her. And Gabriel Byrne, I thought he was born 50 years old, but he wasn't. He was, even though he still kind of looks the same. He has aged gracefully, but you know, I was not familiar with young Gabriel Byrne. The Usual Suspects was like the oldest movie I remember seeing him in.
Yeah.
Which came 5 years after this. Just a really interesting movie, really fun one that I think gets tossed around a lot by people who like movies as kind of an unsung classic, but I would gather that 80% of the movie-going public has never even heard of it.
It's funny that you say that because my thought right now was just like, this is a movie for people who like movies. You have to have a little bit of at least tolerance for the genre stuff. It's got a lot of period look and feel. It's got lots of period dialogue.
We assume, like, we don't know if people said, what's the rumpus, you know?
But the Coens adopted that wholeheartedly, and they sell it. They're like, there's a way these people talk. And it's not only snappy, old-timey movie dialogue, but it's rich with their set of colloquialisms. So you have to kind of tolerate that, and you have to be okay with a movie that has a dense plot of mobster intrigue. But all that stuff is excellently well done, but that's not why you end up loving the movie. You love the movie because it's just a really good story and really well told. And like you said, the plot unfolds from scene to scene. It does the work that a movie should do, or that any story should do. The stuff that matters, that makes you feel feelings, the anxieties, the concerns, the fears of these characters, they become really palpable, and every scene cranks up the heat. It's a movie that's kind of a tragedy, not in terms of totally traditional where everyone dies at the end, but the hero wins by losing everything, basically. And you feel that building from scene to scene in the movie, and it's just really exciting and fun, and it reminds you why good stories are good.
Well said. Do you want to get into the making of the movie, how it came to be?
Absolutely. Let's hear how this thing happened.
In 1990, the Coen brothers released Miller's Crossing, a gorgeously shot, deeply stylized gangster saga that flopped hard enough at the box office to be declared Sleeping with the Fishes, but found a second life as a cult classic and critical darling. This was just the brothers' third feature following Blood Simple and Raising Arizona, and already they were proving hard to pin down, seamlessly switching from sun-drenched slapstick to cold-blooded noir. Miller's Crossing was inspired by their love for classic gangster films, particularly Dashiell Hammett's The Glass Key and Red Harvest. But while the movie wears its genre on its pinstripe sleeve, the Coens injected their usual off-kilter rhythm with impossibly dense dialogue, existential dread, and the ever-present image of a lone black hat tumbling through the trees.
They gave us the high hat, and it was beautiful.
That hat became the central metaphor for the movie, and also the image they began the script with. Unfortunately, writing the rest of the script didn't come so easily, as the Coens found themselves suffering from intense writer's block. So the brothers temporarily bailed and wrote Barton Fink in just 3 weeks, a movie about writer's block, before returning to finish Miller's Crossing.
They beat writer's block with some quick thinking.
Filmed in New Orleans on a modest budget, which was reported to be $14 million, though the Coens disputed that figure, the movie's cast was stacked with future stars. Gabriel Byrne as the sharp but emotionally distant Tom Reagan, Marcia Gay Harden in her breakout role as femme fatale Verna, and Jon Turturro as Bernie Birnbaum, a sniveling bookie with a penchant for begging. Barry Sonnenfeld handled the cinematography, giving the film its signature smoky shadows and symmetrical frames, while Carter Burwell returned a score, draping the whole thing in tragic Irish melancholy.
Oh, Danny boy, did he ever.
The plot is notoriously dense, a Prohibition-era tale of rival crime syndicates, political corruption, and one man playing all sides in a bid for survival. It's a movie where every line is a clue, every gesture is a lie, and every character is either doomed, double-crossing somebody, or dead.
Unless they're just pretending.
The critics loved it. Miller's Crossing currently holds a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the box office, not so much. It grossed just $5 million, well short of even its modest budget, and was quickly ushered out of theaters, overshadowed by the likes of Goodfellas, Ghost, and Pretty Woman.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to
Outgross Miller's Crossing.
Still, the movie's reputation grew. It's now considered one of the Coen's best, a slow burn masterpiece that rewards rewatching and obsessive analysis. It helped define their cinematic voice, wry, bleak, literary, and weirdly funny, and paved the way for Fargo, The Big Lebowski, and the long line of genre-defying gems that would follow. It may have bombed, but like its central character, Miller's Crossing plays the long game, and it won.
You're talking about the Coen's stylistic elements and how it can be bleak, violent, and scary at times, but also funny. It's a little hard to catch all the funny or really enjoy it in the first watch. Not only because maybe you don't know what you're going to see. If you look at the trailer of this movie, it's all about the twists and turns and the gangster intrigue and the escalating mob war stuff, and it doesn't pitch it as a funny movie at all. And then when you're watching it, you have to really concentrate on the plot at the beginning. And so I got through the first couple scenes, which are quite dense with trying to learn new characters, and we'll talk about their names and the way they talk and all that stuff. You have to concentrate so much that you don't realize how much humor is in that scene, and there's a lot. So I laughed a lot more on my second watch.
There are some scenes that are laugh out loud funny, and there are other scenes that are kind of slickly funny, where maybe a minute later you're like, I get it. But that really is a hallmark of the Coens. I mean, we've talked about it on the pod before, but my favorite movie of all time is No Country for Old Men, and that's another movie that seems and is incredibly bleak, but also has some genuinely hilarious sequences and moments which are played very straight, so it can be easy to miss them. That's the thing. The Coen brothers rarely let their characters in on the joke. You know, everything's funnier because of context that we have, and they maybe don't.
Yeah, like anytime Anton Chigurh comes on screen, he's fucking terrifying. You're shitting your pants, but he's also funny. Yeah. You can't necessarily appreciate that until later.
His showdown with the gas station attendant is like a masterclass in comedic timing, except he's toying with this poor guy's life.
Yeah, it's terrifying and hilarious.
But we've talked a lot about how dense the plot of Miller's Crossing is. Do you think we should start to go through it, just in case we find ourselves getting lost in the woods, so to speak?
Let's get right into it and see if we can find our way out.
All right.
Tom Reagan, played by Gabriel Byrne, is the trusted friend and right-hand man to Irish mob kingpin Leo O'Bannon, played by Albert Finney, a political boss who rules over an unspecified Prohibition-era U.S. city. The story begins when an Italian mobster named Casper, played by Jon Polito, and his intimidating enforcer Eddie the Dane, played by J.E. Freeman, show up at Leo's office to make a request. Casper wants permission to kill an upstart bookie named Byrne Birnbaum. Someone's been leaking info about the boxing matches that Casper has fixed, and Byrne's been using the tips to place his own bets and diminish Casper's profits. Tom agrees that Byrne deserves punishment, but Leo pushes back, noting that Byrne pays Leo for protection. What Leo doesn't tell Casper is that he's in love with Byrne's sister Verna, and he intends to marry her, so Leo shuts down Casper's request, who leaves furious at being given the high hat. The next day, we meet Verna, played by Marcia Harden, when Tom goes to her apartment to retrieve his hat. Soon we realize Tom and Verna are romantically involved behind Leo's back. Late that night, Leo shows up at Tom's apartment worried that he can't find Verna. Tom consoles his friend, but he can't admit that Verna's right there in his bedroom at that very moment. The next day, Tom's relationships are all under strain. He's at odds with his friend and boss Leo, who seems to be willing to start a gang war with Casper to protect Verna's brother Byrne. And he's fighting with his love interest Verna, who he accuses of cozying up to Leo just for the sole purpose of protecting Byrne. Then Byrne, the subject of all this fuss, shows up in Tom's apartment. Byrne offers to pay off Tom's considerable gambling debts if he'll be his ally. Tom says he'll think about it.
The movie opens on the distinguished face of one Jon Polito.
Yeah.
And if you don't think you know who Jon Polito is, you're wrong. You absolutely do.
Yeah.
He's the Italian guy in all the movies, usually some kind of gangster.
Bald head, pencil mustache, signature look.
Imagine my surprise on my 39th birthday when I come to find out that Jon Polito was 39 fucking years old when he made this movie. I had to go look in the mirror immediately and be like,
reality check.
that's a rough 39. You You pointed out that his skin is relatively unblemished and pretty smooth. You know, he's got like a young man's skin.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot working against him in the age department.
You know, I would make the argument that a lot of that is in his acting. Like, he's acting older, and so you just buy that he's the veteran. It's interesting, the characters are somewhat ranked by age and experience. Albert Finney plays the boss of the town, and he looks just old enough to sort of be on top of the heap.
Mid-50s, I would guess, yeah.
Yeah, Polito has to play right behind him as the guy who has a case to be made why he should be boss of the town. And they all treat Gabriel Byrne like he's the younger sidekick, but he doesn't honestly look much younger than anybody in the movie. But they all sort of make it work through their acting.
I mean, John Polito's just one of those guys I always imagined was 57 years old. Like, he was born 57 and he died at 57, RIP to a king. Because he didn't get noticeably older, you know? If you watch a movie of his from like 1998, he looks the fucking same. So he just kind of started at this baseline. But he's so good in this movie.
He's great. He's almost the lead.
He's my favorite character. Every time he's on screen, I'm like, yeah. Because like he's menacing to an extent, but he's so ridiculous that he just keeps everything from feeling too grim.
He's a bad guy with a lot of heart. You get to meet his family. You see the complications of the way he treats his wife and his son. And he's the one who has a philosophy about being ethical more than any of the crooks that we meet in this movie. He's a very nuanced, rangy character. He goes from totally jovial and funny to terrifyingly vengeful at the end. And so it's quite a journey.
Why'd they put his son in a little sailor outfit, though? Like, I wouldn't call it a subplot. It's really just one scene where his wife and son visit him at work and they're concerned that his son's gaining too much weight. But Casper doesn't see it. He's not on board with this diagnosis from the doctor. But the kid's wearing a little sailor suit. Like, that might have been the style at the time. I don't know. You were around. What was it like?
Oh, yeah. I wore a sailor suit until my 15th birthday. No, I don't know. It's just a classic thing. The wardrobe, the costumes in this movie are one of its strengths. We'll hit that as we try to list them off. And that sailor suit is among the best.
Yes, obviously very memorable. It's not even in this section of the movie. I think it's in the second act. But you did call out that the movie's kind of giving itself a Herculean task the way it's formatted. What was your qualms with how the movie presents itself?
It dumps a lot on you in this first scene. And like we're saying, the explanation of the situation is tough to decipher. They keep the character of Byrne hidden from you, but you have to know who he is from the beginning because he's the start of this mob war. So you've got to start to figure all this out. And yet they're talking in crazy period dialogue. Every person who you meet has at least one nickname and sometimes more. There's this guy named Casper, who's the Italian mobster, but he's also called Johnny. But then they reveal that his real name is Giovanni Gasparo. And then as soon as they mention Byrne, the next sentence, he says, you got to do something about the Schmata kid. And you're like, who's the Schmata kid? Well, that's the Byrne that he just brought up in the last sentence, but he's got a nickname and he'll alternate between them interchangeably. So it's a lot.
And Casper's top henchman is Eddie Dane, who is sometimes Eddie and sometimes just the Dane, but almost never Eddie Dane. So you got to kind of figure that one out. Originally, the movie was titled The Big Head, which was supposed to be Tom's nickname. But luckily, I don't think they ever actually say that in the movie. So they kept us from having to decipher another nickname.
Yeah, we got to thank them for that. They scrubbed one layer of complexity. Let's let the hero just be Tom.
Some real J.R. Tolkien type shit, though. If you've read Lord of the Rings, everybody's got multiple names depending on who's describing them. So the Coens taking inspiration from all different types of literary giants.
And speaking of literary giants, let's jump to the movie's strengths. Obviously, the movie is very neo-noir with character archetypes. That's very faithful to old-timey, hard-boiled gangster type of stuff. So in that sense, it's classical, but I'm like, this is classical to a deeper level. This is like Shakespearean to me.
Yeah. A lot of those old noir movies don't have a ton happening below the surface. I mean, plot-wise they do, but not like emotionally.
This one is like each scene, each character has got these personal relationship intrigues and the way they unfold and build towards the tragedy. It feels Shakespearean to me in a really good way. I'm like, oh, this is what's good about Shakespeare. Like every character's personal issues come out and they complicate the story.
Yeah. And like we mentioned, the Coens do have their motifs they like to rely on in the dialogue. What's the rumpus is the big one also. Is it just Casper that talks about the hi-hat? Is that like his catchphrase or do other people mention that as well? I can't remember.
Casper says it a mess of times. I think other people only use it when they're echoing Casper's feelings, but they all say, what's the rumpus? Like so many times I didn't even notice it until second watch. They start every other scene with a different character that goes, hey, what's the rumpus?
Just like their version of what's up?
Yeah, what's up?
What's going on? But I like it. It gives the movie a real feeling of like, this is a time and place that's consistent. It's not just a mishmash of like, we're recreating what we half staff know about from other movies. Like they sat down and crafted a world that felt real. And those kind of recurring motifs in the dialogue, like, of course, these guys are all of a similar age. They work in the same industry. Of course, they're going to have overlap in the way they talk. And I think the movie's just, it's like a smart way to approach it.
It's really well done. And you don't need to even decode the phrase, what's the rumpus? Because it's unfamiliar at first, but you understand what they're saying from context clues. Like, this is just how people talk. And whatever phrase they use in that situation, you kind of get it, even if you don't. Did they say rumpus?
If you've seen Where the Wild Things Are or read it, you should know what the rumpus is.
It's been a while, honestly.
It's like the shenanigans, the adventures.
A lot of rumpus going on in this movie.
A lot of rumpus. Barry Sonnenfeld did not know he was like an all-star Coen Brothers collaborator before he became a director in his own right.
He's a Blast Zone veteran. We loved his work as director of Addams Family Values. We detested his work as director of Wild Wild West. But he's a great cinematographer, which I didn't know. I watched this movie. I'm like, oh, the shots, the visuals in this movie are so great. And then his name came on in the credits. I'm like, I know who that guy is.
It begs the question, though, of with everything we know about Barry Sonnenfeld, where is the novelty rap song over the end credits of Miller's Crossing?
They went a different direction. They went in direction of Danny Boy and not so much Will Smith.
This was the second to last movie he did cinematography for. The final movie, which you actually told me about because you happened to be listening to Barry Sonnenfeld's audiobook about his career, was Misery with Rob Reiner. And
that's right, Misery.
He went on to become a director, and Addams Family was his first movie as a director.
He got offered that in the middle of shooting Misery, so that's when he made a pivot, and a really successful pivot. But I mean, he was buddies with the Coens, so he did their first 3 movies. Raising Arizona was really big for him because that has really dynamic camera work. The camera in that movie is
it's a great movie.
Very much like a character. It's a big part of the look and the comedy of it. But then he DP'd When Harry Met Sally, a bunch of other big movies. He was just like a hot DP for a little stretch, and then big movies.
Tom Hanks
80s,
gets
right?
No, the movie Big.
I know, but Big was a big movie, literally.
It was.
And figuratively.
And also Blood Simple, which is one of my favorite top 3 Coen Brothers movies.
Yeah, really neat.
If you like the more hard-edged Coen Brothers style, that one's probably their least funny movie.
Maybe.
But it's good stuff. But yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld, who knew? Lots of people probably, just not us.
Just not us, now we know.
I'm sure we had that information at some point when we were covering his movies, but it just slipped away like everything does.
Yeah, he's a cool part of this. And the shots, it starts in the opening credits with this floating hat dream shot that you mentioned in your monologue, which I watched, and I'm like, wait a minute, this movie's too old for them to have been able to CGI that. How did they get this hat to do this beautiful dance where it falls into screen right in the center, and then the wind picks it up and carries it flipping away into the distance? I'm like, that was just beautiful and elegant to look at. And reading his memoir, it was a lot of work because they just had some fishing wire on the hat, and they had to throw it into frame perfectly, and then they had to yank it up and away into the distance. And it kind of spoiled the shot because now when I see it, you can see their solution. The problem was when they would drag it with the fishing line, it would just scuttle across the forest floor and look stupid. Mm-hmm. They're like, we need it to flip in the air. So there's actually some twigs sitting upright just behind the hat. So it falls into this first position, and then there's these twigs that make it flip. And then once it flips, it catches air and continues to flip. But yeah, they did it the old-fashioned way with hard work.
My ass would have been just that, a frame with like a leaf blower.
That would have been a cool way to do it, although it probably would have kicked up too much leaves and dust.
True. It is the forest, famously full of leaves and dust.
But yeah, it's a movie about hats, obviously, we already mentioned. It's a movie about mirrors and shadows and textures of clothing, which look just amazing on film. If you get to see this on the biggest screen you can, it's really worth it because there's all these cool shots. You know, it does the film noir stuff with light and shadow, and there are scenes where there's dramatic shadows and light filtering through blinds and windows. But just even standard indoor scenes, the costuming is so good, and just appreciating the patterns on these guys' ties, which are insane, and the texture on their overcoats, that's just like a big part of what I enjoyed out of the movie.
Yeah, dressing a movie like this has got to be expensive. Movies set in this time period often feel like everyone's wearing a Halloween costume. It's a very difficult thing to get just right. And you maybe don't even consciously notice it, but the fact that you don't notice that it doesn't work means it does.
Yes.
If that makes sense. But like you called out in your notes, a big part of why it works is the cast. And not just that they're good actors, they also just look like they would have been people in this time period and in the city, this unnamed city. I know it was filmed in New Orleans, but there's really nothing that makes it feel like New Orleans outside of the architecture. Nobody's got the Creole accent or anything like that going on.
Yeah.
But like Gabriel Byrne, he just looks like a mob lackey in the 30s and 40s. Marcia Gay Harden, yeah, you could buy her as a femme fatale.
Oh yeah, she's classic.
Very classic look. And the Coen brothers always cast well, but it's so much more important when you're dealing with a very specific time and place.
Yeah, to me, it's another testament or a sign of their talent that this was pretty early in their career, and they were able to surround themselves on a movie where they were making this on a low budget, and the people that they gathered around them, that they attracted to them, which includes Sonnenfeld, who was a friend of theirs from college days and so was with them the whole time. And then this crew of actors, the composer, Carter Burwell, like all these great people that add up to make this a movie that's like top to bottom, just a standard of excellence.
Yeah, and not to mention that even with actors, it tends to be the case where if you work with the Coen brothers and they like you, like you'll be in a lot of their stuff. Like Jon Turturro became a frequent collaborator of theirs. Gabriel Byrne, I'm not so sure. I think this might have been his one and done with the Coens. But yeah, like you'll see, they kind of pick people up and adopt them as part of their crew. Like Steve Buscemi, this is a very early Steve Buscemi role.
Yes.
And then he would go on to be a fixture in a lot of these Coen brothers movies, particularly Fargo.
And this was just like him breaking in because his character is significant. But as you and I like checked with each other, we're like, wait a minute, Buscemi's on screen once in this movie for a really short scene. And he was hired because he could talk really fast. And he does. He spits out a bunch of lines in 15 seconds and then you don't see him again. You're like, oh, that was it.
He missed his call to be like a radio dispatcher or like a carnival barker, an auctioneer. He's got that very distinct like,
but yeah, he livens it up. And Turturro is really like the actor that they keep in their back pocket. It's really interesting how the film is structured, where all the tension and fuss is building up around this character of Byrne, and we haven't seen him. And that's why I sort of put that as the signpost at the end of this first act is Byrne shows up in a dramatic way in a big scene. And Turturro is kind of chewing the scenery, but he's so great. He makes a big impression and pays off when the character finally shows up on screen.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure when in Turturro's career this movie took place, but then looking through his filmography, he had already done like Do the Right Thing, which was a big role for him and kind of his breakup. But he was in big stuff before that, To Live and Die in LA, The Color of Money.
Okay.
I don't know to what extent his characters are important to those movies or if they were just bit parts. But he certainly wasn't a spring daisy when he made this movie, which is kind of crazy because it feels like this would have been a textbook breakout role for a guy like him.
Yeah, I guess he's the kind of actor that breaks out in every role because he's so good.
He's very versatile. He can play all different types. I always knew him as like a loud, brash, obnoxious guy because of The Big Lebowski.
Sure.
Primarily is where I knew him from when I was younger. But then even watching him on Severance, he's playing a very different type of dude than I'd seen him play before. He really is like the boogeyman of this movie. Like you don't see him a lot, but when you do, it's always one of the most important and consequential scenes.
Yes, it's lump in your throat time. And he flips very interestingly from pathetic, from being a loser that's just sort of getting by working the angles, to being kind of really competent and scary when it furthers the plot in an interesting way. It's a really cool character and really cool to see how it plays out in this story.
Did you want to fill in the listeners on who he based his performance on?
This is a well-known piece of trivia, and I got to hear it directly from Barry Sonnenfeld in his own words in his autobiography. Turturro came up to Sonnenfeld. He's like, I based Byrne on you, Bah, which is what they call Barry, apparently.
It's a pretty bad nickname.
Barry, because he's a native New Yorker. I don't say Barry that way. I say it Barry like a fruit. But apparently, Turturro came up to Sonnenfeld and said, the whining and the neediness, that's all you, Bah.
It's not a very nice thing to say to somebody.
Not very flattering. But Barry Sonnenfeld, the way he says it, is a big personality, very needy, very attention-seeking, and an interesting character. One of Hollywood's interesting characters.
So Byrne is a very, like you said, volatile. He oscillates back and forth between being menacing and being pathetic. The movie's probably biggest contrast to him is both Gabriel Byrne as Tom, who we've already talked about a little bit, and Albert Finney as Leo, who are both very old-timey kind of stoic men's men.
Tough, unflappable.
Don't talk too much. And that's, there are some scenes later on that we'll get to where you see Tom's resolve waver, and those are more powerful because of how he's been presented throughout the movie. Leo's got a bit of a soft spot for Tom. He's not presented as like a cruel, kind of evil mob boss, like he seems like a relatively decent guy.
He's quite human, and he's humanized more by his love for Verna, which, he has this real weakness for Verna, and he lets his emotions get away from him. And he's always relied on Tom to be the sober, serious guy who uses his brain to keep him on the straight and narrow so his emotions don't get away with him.
All right. Was there anything else from this first section we had to go over? Should we get on to the middle act?
I think we're ready to move on. Let's hear what happens next.
All right. Tensions continue to escalate as a pair of thugs snatch Tom off the street and take him to a face-to-face meeting with Casper. Casper seems reasonable when he offers to pay off Tom's growing gambling debts if he'll cross Leo and give up Byrne. But Tom is loyal to Leo and refuses. So once again, Casper leaves, furious at being given the hi-hat. The thugs stay behind to give Tom a beating, which is interrupted when the cops, under Leo's direction, storm Casper's joint in large numbers to shake up Casper's business. The next night, Casper sends a car full of gunmen to Leo's house, but Leo turns the tables and single-handedly kills all the would-be assassins. The next day, Tom makes a big play to Leo to try to end the gang war. But out of his dedication to Verna, Leo still won't agree to give up their brother Byrne. So to undermine that dedication, Tom admits he's sleeping with Verna. This doesn't end the war, but it does ruin their relationship, as Leo beats up Tom and throws him out of his club. club. Soon after, Tom goes to Casper, seemingly ready to join his side. As a show of his new loyalty, Tom tells Casper where to find Byrne. So Casper has Tom drive his 2 thugs to snatch up Byrne and take him out to the woods at Miller's Crossing. When they get there, there's a sickening twist. Casper told the thugs that to prove his loyalty, Tom must pull the trigger and kill Byrne himself. So Tom walks Byrne deep out among the trees alone. Byrne falls to his knees and tearfully begs for his life. At the last moment, Tom looks into his heart and spares Byrne's life, making Byrne promise to disappear and never be seen again.
Likely story.
Nobody has ever gotten out of town and never be seen again in the history of towns or Vision. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you kind of know that it's not going to be that easy. Yeah, a lot of plot in the middle, as we expect. An interesting thing about this movie, which I saw commented on in an essay that you showed me about Dashiell Hammett's stories and the part the Coen brothers took from those stories. And one of them is that, like, Tom, as the hero, is playing this long game. He's making the moves, trying to get things to work out his way, but it's not like he has a master plan from the beginning. He's just making the next best available move to him at each point with faith that he's going to make it work out. And so that's a good part of the drama of the movie is like, what is he doing? Is he making it worse? Is he really going over to the other side? Should he have really given up Byrne? Oh shit, is he going to have to actually kill Byrne himself? He didn't expect that. So it's very much a cause and effect movie where the people are making choices and their consequences.
But you had to assume he was never going to betray Leo if Casper just paid off his gambling debt, because we see Leo almost beg him to just let him pay off the debt for him, or at least, if not pay it off, just like call up the guy and be like,
make it go away.
He doesn't owe you anything anymore.
Yeah.
So he's clearly not motivated by money. He's motivated by a sense of honor and pride.
His loyalty is his strength and his downfall, which is the tragedy of the movie. But that's a really interesting emotional core of the movie. Is this is really about Tom being loyal to Leo for no great reason, no like overarching reason. He's not actually holding something over him like Leo saved his life or rescued him as a child or anything that's sort of like plot justified. It's just about this person, Tom, who's like, I got to do right by my guy. And he does. And basically sacrifices himself to loyalty to Leo.
The movie just kind of hints at a lot of shared history between the two without filling in any details explicitly. You just get the sense they've been a team for a long time. But Tom seems frustrated by Leo throughout most of this movie because there's a lot of lines like, well, you used to listen to me.
Yeah.
My opinion used to matter and now it doesn't. So you feel Tom getting frustrated, but it's another way that it speaks to his character that he doesn't let that push him to the other side. He's still just as firmly in Leo's camp, even when we're not sure.
It's a really interesting commentary on male relationships and values. And it's not cut and dried. It leaves a lot of questions that are worth contemplating at the end of the movie.
Is the cure to the male loneliness epidemic getting a fedora and a Tommy gun?
It's one way.
We've got some great bit players in this movie.
In fedoras, each one of them.
Many with Tommy guns. But they show up for a handful of scenes. They don't say or do much, but they make their performances count.
For sure.
And 2 of those I wanted to single out here are Frankie and Tic Tac, Casper's probably like 4th and 5th hand. You know, he's got his right-hand man in the Dane.
That's right.
And these guys are probably like his 5th or 6th down the line, but they're good for some stuff, I guess. They are Mike Starr and Al Mancini. Mike Starr is another one. If you don't think you know who Mike Starr is, yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
He's been in lots of stuff. Big galoot in this movie. And I think the funniest scene in the movie to me is in this section when Casper is mad that Tom won't join his team. So he leaves the room and Mike Starr looks like he's about to start beating the shit out of Tom. Tom goes, hold on. So he could take his jacket off, swings a chair directly at Frankie's face. But instead of getting mad and beating him up, he gets like real sad and leaves.
Yeah, he's standing there. His nose is bloody. He checks it. And he's like, oh, man. But he doesn't say anything. He just says that with his face. And then he walks out of the room. He goes to get...
He gets Tic Tac.
Tic Tac. He needs Tic Tac. Because funny enough, although Frankie is the big galoot and Tic Tac is a little wiry guy, it turns out that Tic Tac is the stronger one because Tom swings the chair at Tic Tac and he grabs it. He like interrupts the blow and throws him off. So it's a great duo in terms of henchmen duos. They're a fabulous pair.
I mean, this movie does violence in a few different ways. Like there are some scenes where the violence is played completely straight and it's horrifying and it's got real consequences. And then other times it's played very slapsticky. And this is purely a slapstick scene, even when Tom comes to after getting beat up a little bit and the cops are there beating up Frankie and Tic Tac. The way the cops are beating up Frankie and Tic Tac is still funny. They're stopping in the middle of it to make jokes. And
exactly. There's jokes in the middle of that. Hey, you wanted to get your licks in? No, thanks. It's very lighthearted.
Which makes the scenes where the violence is played to be horrifying and shocking more effective, I think.
Great aspect of the Coen style.
Were you squirming in your chair when you realized what Tom was about to tell Leo? That scene in the club?
Where he admits he makes his ploy. It's tough. It's real. Like you feel this relationship. The relationship that both Tom and Leo have with Verna, all of that feels like a real love triangle, you know, not like a Hollywood one, but like a real life kind of fucked up situation.
Yeah. We've already established that Leo's got a real soft spot for Verna, so it's not super shocking that he ends up forgiving her. But I was unsure which way it would go with him and Tom in this moment. And it turns out he's going to punch him a bunch.
Yeah. And we both liked, once Tom is on the outs with his dude Leo needs a new right-hand man. And a great character actor named Lanny Flaherty steps in as Terry, who's just very different from Tom as the new right-hand man, but a really fun, interesting character in his own right.
And he has another one of my favorite scenes in the movie where Leo is kind of punching Tom out of his club. He punches him and then follows him. And when Tom gets up, he punches him again. Lanny gives him his hat back because Tom he's really attached to that hat.
He's attached to that hat the way the dude is attached to his rug. It's a symbol for him of things being right in his world.
Another character I wanted to shout out that I don't think we had any space for him in the notes, but he was just really fun is the bartender.
Yes.
At Leo's club. I thought he was a great addition.
He's super cool. He sort of does bartender stuff, makes some commentary, tries to give the hero some advice. And I love that. I think he's a Polish actor. I don't remember his name, but I love his accent. It just it adds another bit of depth to the movie that I wanted to hear that guy say lines.
Do you know where we'd seen Lanny Flaherty before? He was in Waterworld.
Oh, yeah. Not an exciting find, but he's got a face, and there were a lot of funky faces in Waterworld.
There sure were. There's a lot of funky stuff going on in that movie. So Tom knows what he's doing here. He wants Casper to hear about his falling out with Leo, but he never lets Leo in on any of this.
Right.
Which is a bold play because Leo could have easily killed him. He's really taking a gamble here that he might just rough him up and let him go.
And that gets commented on, in the end when they come back together, Leo's like, oh, I should have known you were planning something the whole time. You should have told me. And he's like, I couldn't tell you. It's one of the interesting and realistic plot complexities that keeps the action spinning and keeps you guessing.
Yeah. And then we get probably the most famous scene in the movie. And one of the most pivotal, of course, is the first time we visit Miller's Crossing.
Yeah.
Jon Turturro going for it in this scene. He was like, I want my Oscar and I want it now. He didn't get it, but he is putting on quite a performance here, begging for his life in the most pathetic way.
It feels really real. He's being death marched out to the woods to be shot in the head, and he goes through the full range of emotions of a man confronting his mortality, from trying to laugh it off to trying to bargain to grieving and crying, this can't happen to me, and begging for his life. It's a tour de force. That's great.
And then we know Tom's in trouble when he tells Byrne to just get out of town. We have a pretty good feeling it's not going to work out super great for him.
Yeah, we're thankful he made a good decision and didn't become as cold a killer as we were hoping our hero not to be. But again, it's another scene where characters make choices and it complicates things. And the plot is still ratcheting up. Yeah.
Was there anything from this section, though, that you want to go over? Should we get to the lengthy climax of the movie? We still got a lot of plot to get through.
There's a lot of movie left to go. Let's dive into that. After the incident at Miller's Crossing, Tom warns Verna she should get out of town. And back at her apartment, we see that he was right as Eddie the Dane breaks in and demands to know where Leo is hiding out. But when the Dane is distracted, Verna gives him the slip, disappearing out her window. And it doesn't take long for the disappeared Byrne to reappear. He shows up at Tom's place and demands that Tom kill Casper, or else he'll reveal himself to still be alive. Meanwhile, Eddie the Dane is suspicious of just this kind of thing happening, so he snatches Tom off the street and takes him back out to Miller's Crossing to look for Byrne's body and prove that he actually killed him. As they walk into the woods, Tom fears this is the end for him. But to his surprise, they find a rotting corpse in Byrne's clothes. Back in town, the gang war is escalating, and the cops have switched sides from Leo over to Casper. Meanwhile, Tom has been planting the idea in Casper's head that Eddie the Dane is disloyal, and that this whole time, the Dane has been the one ripping Casper off. Finally, in an explosive confrontation, Casper sides with Tom and kills Eddie the Dane with a fireplace shovel. Then Casper heads off to Tom's apartment to intercept and kill the Dane's boyfriend and co-conspirator, Mink Leroy. Except Tom knows that Byrne has already killed Mink, and that it's actually Byrne that Tom has arranged to come to his apartment that night. So when Casper arrives at Tom's door, Byrne is there, he shoots Casper dead, then Tom arrives, and in his second attempt, Tom shoots Byrne dead, staging things to look like Casper and Byrne killed each other in a shootout. In the aftermath, Verna hates Tom for killing her brother, which he doesn't deny, which drives her into the arms of Leo. And Leo is so pleased that Tom has restored Leo's position as boss of the city and also made it possible for Leo to marry Verna that he offers to forgive him and resume his friendship with Tom. But Tom can't accept the offer. He says goodbye to Leo, who walks away, leaving Tom standing all alone.
What an ending.
Great ending. A lot of plot, like you said, in that third act. So much so that I feel like if I hadn't seen the movie, I wouldn't have made sense of the paragraphs that I just read. There's so many people, there's so many threads coming together, but it's so beautifully crafted that even for me, who's a logic junkie and needs my plots to be airtight, this plot is airtight. Every single thing connects perfectly.
Yeah, complicated and, twisty does not have to mean illogical. They sat down and they really mapped this out where it all makes sense. It all works, but it is a lot to keep track of. And I'm thinking back to what we've talked about already, we have not even really touched on J.E. Freeman,
Yes.
who is fantastic in this movie as Eddie Dane.
Yeah.
Just an all-time terrifying henchman. Super competent, which like he's not a nice guy at all, but like you come to kind of respect him as the movie goes on because like he's right about everything all the time.
Yes.
His boss doesn't always listen to him, but he gets what's going on literally every step of the way.
He sees through every lie, every deception. He's incredibly good at his job. We see him kill one guy by shooting through the wall.
That's so fucking cool. I love that shot.
The gunman ducks back out the door frame and the Dane just sort of takes aim and kills him with a single shot through the wall.
It helps that he's got that fucking hand cannon. It's
Yeah.
a 44. That'll go right through a wall, a little plaster wall.
So, I mean, we're talking about it being a talky movie. It's about its stylized dialogue and complex plot, but the Coens add some actually smart action. The gunplay is really well executed, so it adds another layer to the movie.
And J.E. Freeman, he was an interesting cat in general. He was from Brooklyn. He was openly gay, which led to him being kicked out of the Marine Corps at the age of 22. And he'd been living HIV positive since 1984 until he passed away in 2014.
Wow.
And he was a poet, was one of his other passions beside acting.
That is the world's most intimidating poet.
Right?
He's a very interesting, complex person and such an archetypal movie villain, just big and scary and, like we said, competent. Really one of the highlights of this movie.
And this was not the only movie where he played like a big, scary mob guy. The same year, he was in Wild at Heart as the main antagonist of that movie. He was terrifying.
I got to see that.
He was in future episode Go, which we'll be covering soon, as like a mobbed up strip club owner. So he was often cast as the heavy because he had that kind of presence about him. But yeah, he had a lot of facets to his personality.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing more of J.E. Freeman. Cool discovery for me, who didn't know.
Yeah. Looking back through his filmography, I've obviously seen him in other stuff, but this was the first time I'm like, I'm going to start watching things specifically to see what he's like in other roles. Because man, what a henchman. If I had 3 Eddie Danes, I could do it all.
I mean, this movie has such a loaded hand, to use playing cards terminology because I'm a Polito addict. They got J.E. Freeman, they got Ken Starr, they got John Polito.
Mike Starr. Ken Starr is the Enron guy.
Yes, no, thankfully, they didn't have Ken Starr. They had Mike Starr. They had so many great character actors in their hand that they almost discarded Steve Buscemi, which is like one of the all-time guys to have, and they just kind of had him as a throwaway.
Speaking of discarding Steve Buscemi, were you shocked when they found Steve Buscemi's body in the woods?
Yeah, and I didn't put it together that was him. You immediately wonder whose body it is, and he's kind of the only guy that it could be. But yeah, what a thing, and what a cool set of parallel scenes in the movie, right? First, Gabriel Byrne is marching Bernie out to his death, and then he gets marched out to his death in this very same place shortly after. So it's really cool structurally to have that thing repeat and see how these two different characters handle the same situation. And you're like, how is he going to get out of this? And wow, there's a body there, and it's so fucked up with bullets in its head and birds pecking at it that you can't tell that it's not Bernie.
Yeah, we don't even know if it's Steve Buscemi, to be honest.
No,
that could have been anybody. But I was genuinely shocked. And like, this is one time where we see Tom's stoicism start to waver. He pukes in the woods when he starts to kind of realize that he's marching to his death. They're not going to find anything out there, obviously. But he's miraculously saved in this moment. And that was a good humanizing moment for Tom because he lives and succeeds by no action of his own, which like we were starting to veer into maybe like the hyper competent territory where like he's not entertaining to watch because he always kind of wiggles his way out using cunning. But here it's like, no, he has no cards left to play. And the fact that he survives has nothing to do with any action he took. He's just lucky, which was nice. Like, you know, you don't necessarily want your hero characters to be one step ahead every time. They kind of start losing its potency.
Yeah, it was a chance to reflect. You know, he doesn't break his stoic character in contrast to Bernie, whose mouth is running a million miles a minute when he's being marched out there. Tom never says anything. Like you said, the only revelation is that he kneels down and barfs against a tree because he can't take the tension. But he doesn't like whip out a gun and turn the tables on the 3 mobsters in some kind of superhero shootout showdown. He just gets lucky. He's playing it by ear the whole time, and his moves almost do him in. But the luck arrives, and it's plausible. It's not movie Deus Ex Machina that feels fake, like, oh, well, of course you had to save the hero with some plot armor. This is like actually an interesting twist, because what it means is that Bernie has killed his lover and confidant.
And Eddie the Dane's lover?
And Eddie the Dane's lover. Yeah, there's love triangles. There's 2 sets of love triangles at the core of this movie that are both really interesting.
Which they never really like sit down and explain that the Dane and Mink are a couple, but like there are hints to be had.
There are hints. That's why the Dane gets so mad when Tom accuses Mink of being the one who's leaking the results to Bernie, and super mad when Tom hints that Bernie's hooking up with Mink. It's part of the undercurrent of where Eddie the Dane's anger comes from.
Yeah. It does make sense for Bernie's character. From his point of view, if Casper and the Danes doesn't think he's out there, he's never going to be safe. So he's like killed two birds with one stone. Mink takes the fall and also literally takes the fall.
Yeah.
And they still assume I'm dead and that Mink just ran off. So he protects Tom not through any kind of charity, but just out of self.
It's self-interest, and it shows that he's the most depraved character because he's willing to kill his business partner and his lover to protect himself.
He's a real Weasley sort.
Which allows us to be okay with when Tom gets a second chance in a showdown to murder Bernie with the shot to the head. Now it's like more justified. It's still a difficult moment for Tom because he's still in love with Verna and is very sadly sort of giving that up. But Bernie deserves it.
Yeah, much of the movie seems to like they seem to hint at the fact that like Tom's not really like a get his hands dirty kind of guy. He's not the trigger man.
Right.
He's the brains. So that was part of like the kind of perverseness of Casper's flunkies making Tom shoot Bernie because they knew that's not really his MO. But then by the time that final scene comes along where he actually doesn't have to. He's got Bernie, he's got the money, he's got the gun. He took out Casper for him already. He could have probably let him walk. Everyone's dead.
Yeah.
Who's left to take it out on, but it's the principle of the matter by then.
It's the principle, and it's sort of carrying through his loyalty to Leo. So that's my interpretation. I'm not sure if that's the only way to see it, but my interpretation of the way the movie wraps up is he's already written off Verna at great pain to himself, which he doesn't really express because he's so stoic. But like you get through the course of the movie that he really loves Verna and they would be the good couple that actually should be together. But in order to drive the final nail in that coffin and drive Verna away and back into Leo's arms, he has to kill her brother. And then he can be like, yeah, it's done. I've made things right for Leo. And part of making things right was permanently ruining his thing with Verna. Verna's
got her baggage too. I mean, Bernie could have been talking out of his ass, but he basically says they had a sexual relationship, him and Verna as well.
Yeah.
So what is it about noir and like incest? It seems to be a big theme, Chinatown, Miller's Crossing.
Yeah. And you don't know whether to believe Bernie at that point, but when you've seen what a piece of shit Bernie is, you're willing to believe that Verna is fairly compromised herself.
But before we get to Bernie's death, one of the real centerpiece scenes of this movie is the big showdown at Casper's house between the Dane, Tom, Casper, and what's this fucking screaming guy's name?
Oh, Drop Johnson.
Drop Johnson. What a name. Great names to be had in this movie.
Another nickname. Great one.
Don't really know why he's screaming like that, but it certainly makes the scene feel more chaotic.
So chaotic, so scary and weird. The Dane has picked up Drop Johnson, who's the one who allowed Tom to track down Bernie, because Bernie was using Drop Johnson as his betting surrogate, which sounds possibly complex. I think I described it accurately.
That makes sense.
So to get to the bottom of all of Tom's chicanery, the Dane has followed him. He picked up Drop Johnson after Tom had visited and beat the real truth out of him. So he's sitting there in this office as the guys have this showdown. And I think pretty much like luckily for Tom, his line of reasoning that he's been working on Casper has sunk in, and it's actually made Casper disloyal to the Dane, although he pretty much sticks by the Dane the whole time and doesn't believe him. But fortunately for Leo, like Casper turns on his boy Eddie at the last minute and kills him. And that freaks out poor old beaten up Drop Johnson to just scream into the camera for the entirety of that whole episode of violence, making it that much more shocking.
I had a small qualm with this scene. If Casper had kind of snuck up behind the Dane and just shot him in the head, all right. But like he beats him with some kind of like, what is it, a fireplace tool?
Like a shovel.
John Polito is not physically overwhelming J.E. Freeman in any situation. Like, because we've seen the Dane be so just like competent, both in like his reasoning, the way he kind of sniffs out these plots against him and his boss, but also just physically. Like, I think if he hit him once with that little flimsy fireplace, it's like a dustpan, I think, right?
Yeah.
The Dane would just turn around and fucking kill him. I was like, this is a big risk to try to like physically fight this man when you're 5'3". This is John Polito probably is. I don't know.
Polito has to sell it through the amount of fury that comes over his body in that scene. That's the only reason you can believe that it actually worked to put the Dane down. But it only puts the Dane down temporarily. Like the Coens are hip to that. He has to go pick up the gun and say, this is why I would tell you to always put one in the head.
Yeah, that's another recurring motif.
Yeah.
Put one in the brain, as Tic Tac would say. So then we see more of Tom's machinations where he orchestrates Casper and Bernie to a showdown at his apartment in the middle of the night, but they both get there a little early. So Tom walks in and we learn from a neighbor that there's been shooting, but we don't really know who's dead and who's alive until Tom goes up the stairs and we see Bernie triumphantly gloating.
Yeah, we see John Polito's bloody bald head sticking through the rails. And that's a thing that the Coens would use again, killing a main character off screen and the drama of discovering him.
R.I.P. Llewellyn.
Yeah, happens in No Country for Old Men. But yeah, it's effective. It's fun because the scene's not over. It's not like you miss the drama of this particular scene. It actually escalates from there, but it starts it off off with a really ominous situation.
I was a little sad. I liked Casper. Like, again, the mob, like, it's the henchmen in this movie that are the evil ones. The bosses seem relatively well adjusted. I guess because they really were like political figures too, to an extent. They had to be presentable to some extent.
And I think it's part of the great irony of the film is that this mob war was not only unnecessary, but just bad for everyone. Like, Casper was not a bad mob boss, and it would have been best if he and Leo could have continued to get along.
Yeah, just killing Byrne would have been a much more linear route for the movie to take, but then we wouldn't have had a movie.
No.
And of course, the ending, which we described. What did you make of it?
It's one of those things where the noir hero is so stoic in a kind of a sad way. It's a wonderfully ironic tragedy that he's so noble that he has to ruin his own life. Not only like his career and his relationship with this guy, Leo, his best buddy, but like the true love of his life. He gives that up for Leo. And then he's too noble to live with the disaster he made, or it's too painful for him. Because Leo's like, buddy, I thought we were on the outs, but now that I see everything you've done for me, let's just be friends again and go back to the way it was. And he's like, actually, I can't do that. It's too fucked up for me. I'm going to stay here in the woods and you guys go live your lives.
What do you think Tom ended up doing?
I don't know. Yeah, there's no prospects for him. There's no seed of hope planted like, oh, I'm going back to Nebraska where I was born and take up the family farm. Nothing like that.
We know he's a shit gambler, so like that's not his future.
That's true.
He's not going to be betting the ponies and making his fortune.
Well, that's kind of all he has was he got enough money to settle his debts, and he's going back to square with his bookie so he can start racking up debts again.
Right. Doesn't he places a bet when he calls to be like, I got the money to settle my debt. And also, I would like to place another bet.
500 on the ponies. Yeah. Everything in his life is still more fucked up than when it started.
We'll catch up with him in Miller's Crossing 2 coming soon. Do you want to hear what these Coen brothers got up to after this movie? I mean, never heard of these guys. Maybe they had a career.
Did they do anything else?
So like we mentioned, this was only their third film after Blood Simple and Raising Arizona, both absolute bangers. If you've not seen them, certainly worth your time.
Yeah.
They'd follow this up with Barton Fink in 91, and then they took a 3-year break until 1994 where they release The Hudsucker Proxy.
Okay.
Tim Robbins, I believe.
Yeah. Sounds like a future episode.
Yes. The Coen brothers are not the most commercially successful directors in the world, so we've got a lot we can choose from, including the classics like The Big Lebowski.
Oh, wow.
That was a bomb. But they released Fargo in 96, which I guess would be maybe their real entry into like the mainstream filmmaking. Like,
yes, that broke through.
People who don't necessarily know who the Coen brothers are have heard of Fargo. Even if they haven't seen it, they know.
Yes.
And they probably have some vague recollection of like a wood chipper being involved somehow. But
and Marge saying, you betcha, like that became,
you betcha.
Everyone said that to each other for a while in American life.
And the first 2 seasons of the show Fargo are incredible. Highly recommend.
Yes, that's a great legacy of the Coens as well.
So The Big Lebowski then came out in 98, and they haven't worked together, sadly, since 2018's The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which was like an anthology film they did for Netflix.
One of my favorites of their work. I'm not the Coen brothers expert. I haven't even seen everything they've done, but I love Buster Scruggs, and I feel like Buster Scruggs is slept on as like, that was some kind of Netflix light entertainment. Buster Scruggs is so full of compelling, emotional stories. It's great.
That's Tim Blake Nelson.
Yes, he's the titular Buster, but there's a bunch of other unrelated stories in it. Liam Neeson is amazing in it. There's a ton of really cool shit in Buster Scruggs. If anyone who thinks they might like the Coens and hasn't watched that one, go back to it, please.
All right. I still have not seen it, so I'm going to have to check it out.
Oh, you got to see it.
So they have been directing separately. Joel directed 2021's The Tragedy of Macbeth. Ethan has directed Jerry Lee Lewis' Trouble in Mind. Drive Away Dolls, featuring a performance from our friend and past guest Josh Flitter.
Nice.
And the upcoming Honey Don't, which I've heard super mixed things about, but I'll still check it out because it's Margaret Qualley and Aubrey Plaza.
I need to see both those movies. He's working on a sort of a lesbian dirtbag trilogy, I think. He's not done with them.
What a trilogy to be working on.
Yeah.
And then so Gabriel Byrne, he'd been acting since 1978, so he was already quite a veteran of film by the time this came out, but his movie work would really like enter a new stratosphere in the 90s. He had this, Cool World, future episode, Little Women, The Usual Suspects, and The Man in the Iron Mask, where he played D'Artagnan.
Oh, neat.
He's still acting. He's done movies semi-recently, like he was in Hereditary, Death of a Ladies' Man, and then he's done a lot of TV work on shows like In Treatment, War of the Worlds, and one of my favorite shows, 000.
Oh, I forgot he was in that.
Yeah.
Man, I got to go. I've been meaning to go back and watch that again because I loved that show so much.
It's so good. Yeah, I probably will do a rewatch in the near future as well. And he'll be in the upcoming Ballerina, which is getting shockingly good reviews.
Oh.
The Ana de Armas John Wick movie.
I hope that's good. That would be really fun.
That was rumored like it was going to be a disaster, but apparently they figured it out. I think they had to do a lot of reshoots, but they got it into a decent place now.
Neat. That's good to hear.
Yes, he's doing that. And Diary of a Mad Old Man. I assume he was playing the titular Mad Old Man.
He's reached that point in his career. actor.
I mean, he has. He's in his 70s, I think, now. This was Marcia Gay Harden's first major film role, which is bananas that she just got plucked out of obscurity by the Coen brothers. And now she's like, she's one of our, maybe not like a star with a capital S, but such a steadying hand in anything you see her. And you're like, all right, there's a baseline of quality associated with this project because they got Marcia Gay Harden to do it.
Yeah.
She had done some small film and TV work throughout the 80s, but she's been so prolific. She has an Oscar. She won an Oscar in 2001 for Pollock for Best Supporting Actress.
Oh, wow.
And she will be in the upcoming Apple TV Plus show, Margot's Got Money Problems.
Cool.
We will never hear about that show because of Apple. They will not advertise it or tell you that it's out.
I was going to say, too bad no one else will see that or even know it existed, but good for her.
The first season is going to cost $700 million to make, and they're not going to tell anyone about it. The Apple way. And
just write it off. Tim Apple writing off shows left and right.
And the last person I wanted to talk about was Turturro. He'd already been acting for a decade. And like I mentioned, his breakout role was 89's Do the Right Thing. Classic movie, classic performance. And he's worked with Spike Lee a lot. I did not realize he also did Jungle Fever.
Okay.
And then he did Barton Fink, where he plays the titular Barton Fink. And he's, of current working actors, I think he's really embraced the one for them, one for me kind of theory.
Okay.
Where he'll do the Transformers movies and the Batman and Exodus, Gods and Kings, but then he'll also do, Secret Window or The Night Of, which was a fantastic show on HBO starring Riz Ahmed, where Jon Turturro plays his lawyer.
Oh, okay. I had forgotten about that.
Really grim, really upsetting, but very well done, very well made. And he's become a fixture on TV with his role as Irv in Severance, a fan favorite. Everybody loves Irv.
Yeah, absolutely. But the question is Severance for them or is it for me? That's for everybody.
That's for everybody. But there's been some speculation that he's done with Severance. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay.
Like he wasn't doing press for it in the second season, but then people were just like, he just doesn't like doing press in general. So he might have just put it in his contract. He doesn't have to. And one tidbit I wanted to get out there before I forget, this movie was filmed in the childhood home of comedian Mark Normand.
What?
Yeah, I think that's Tom's apartment.
Oh.
Where Mark Normand, the comedian, grew up in New Orleans.
Interesting. It certainly looks vintagey. It's like a funky old time layout, pocket doors on the bedroom. Like I actually noticed that apartment because it's the site of some big scenes. And I'm like, this place is weird.
Yeah, the Coens said they picked New Orleans specifically because some of the city just has not been updated for sad reasons because a lot of the city is very poor, but it also leads to a lot of old timey architecture that would feel at home in the time period this movie takes place in.
Yeah, like you're saying, both the costumes and the sets and locations don't have that Halloween feel. They feel lived in and real.
So, Ian, would you like to know what we're doing next episode?
Yes, I definitely would.
You actually don't know right now, do you?
No, I think we're back to the old way where I'm clueless.
I talked to you about what's coming up soon, but that's not what's coming up next.
Okay.
Next episode, we're going to be doing, I assume, a fan favorite. I could just be making that up. It's a favorite of mine. The 2002 comedy horror, Bubba Ho-Tep.
Oh.
Where Bruce Campbell plays Elvis.
Oh, that's Bruce Campbell. Okay.
Yeah, we're finally getting Bruce on the show and not for any of the Evil Dead movies, even though I think Army of Darkness could be an episode one day. We're doing Bubba Ho-Tep, a real cult classic.
I don't know anything about it. I've seen the cover of it on the Letterboxd list, but I'm like, it's clearly an Elvis thing. Who's that guy? It's Bruce Campbell. That makes it that much more interesting for me to dive in.
It would have been smart to do Army of Darkness next because then we could be like, directed by Sam Raimi, who, by the way, is a character in Miller's Crossing.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to drop that little tidbit.
There's a snickering gunman, I believe, is how he's billed in the credits.
He's credited as snickering gunman, which is a good role to get. A lot of hardworking snickerers in Hollywood were after that role, but the Coen's buddy Sam got the part.
He looks the part, too. Like, he does look like an old-timey, like, scumbag, hitman.
Yeah,
like,
it's good. It's a good little cameo.
Frances McDormand gets a cameo as well.
That's right.
But, like, they were already married. She was already married to Joel?
Yes.
I believe.
Joel and Frances.
That is Miller's Crossing. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate you.
We do.
You can rate, review, subscribe to the pod wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube. We're on YouTube. Don't forget.
Yeah, check us out there.
We've had a nice increase in listeners lately. So any new listeners, we'd love if you would leave us a review. If you listen on a platform where they allow reviews, Spotify and Apple both do now.
That'd be great.
You can follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod, Blue Sky, BlastZonePod.BlueSky.com. You can email us if you have any movie suggestions, recommendations, questions, feedback. Just want to talk about movies. We're at BlastZonePod@gmail.com.
We'd love to hear from you.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone. The Blast Zone.